Hello and welcome to the Trust and Influence in B2B podcast. I'm your host, Joel Harrison. As the title suggests, this podcast has got a very broad remit covering all the evolving challenges associated with generating trust and influencing buyers in all areas of B2B. These are big issues, tough issues, perennial issues, but they've taken on a kind of new urgency and resonance in what's a really fast changing landscape at the moment. So episodes are released weekly. Please don't forget to subscribe and like or rate this episode or the podcast generally. We'd love to get you on board for future episodes. So now, if you're working in B2B marketing, you can't have failed to notice the number of events that are going on currently, either for or about B2B marketing or in other vertical sectors. I have no quantifiable data for this, but it feels like events have never been so popular, and it's not really hard to figure out why. There's a massive overload of digital content these days, and buyers are scrambling around for something more resonant and tangible to engage and help them on their journeys. How do B2B marketers translate this enthusiasm for events into an event strategy that actually delivers against growth and revenue goals? That's exactly the kind of thing you'd expect Cvent, who are a global leader in event tech, to have been thinking about long and hard. And they've come up with a very compelling response to what they're calling event-led growth. So with me to discuss this in more detail and what's a sponsored episode is Felicia Asiedu, who is Cvent's European Marketing Director and a passionate exponent of events in B2B marketing strategy herself. I'm looking forward to tapping into her personal insights on what makes for a great event and moreover, how events can be used as part of a primary growth driver, and also what it's like being Dermot O'Leary's best mate. We'll explain more later. In this session, you'll learn why B2B organizations are moving away from a single flagship event model towards a more kind of year-round tactical event program, the connection between strategic events and trust building in B2B buying, the evidence for event-led growth and what the data reveals around pipeline velocity and revenue outcomes, and how to map events strategically across the buyer journey in different personas. So lots to talk about. Felicia, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me and for referencing me being Dermot O'Leary's busy mate. I couldn't love anything more.
We should explain that a bit, right? So, because you just had your Connect event, didn't you, right?
That's right. So Cvent Connect Europe happens every year, for marketers, event professionals, hoteliers, and for Dermot O'Leary. So some years back, we were chopping and changing on event hosts. And, you always do that thing at events and you're like, should we have a celebrity for the draw? Which host do we get? Do we get an industry professional? And I'd had a few. And so I don't know why I landed on Dermot a few years back. And I was just like, I grew up with him on TV. He's a great host. But he came along, did a good job, and I invited him back again. And I kind of want him back again next year for the continuity of it all. So he's starting to understand us as people, and that helps him to be a good host. So, yeah, now he's in my WhatsApps, So I just think I'm kind of trying to tackle that age-old thing of like, do you get a celeb just for the draw? Or actually, should they start to learn a bit about you and you have some consistency at your events? So that explains that.
I felt like he probably done. I didn't see the intro last year, I saw it this year, and I felt like he'd definitely been on a bit of a journey with you guys to understand what you're all about, and he got some rapport with your CEO. And I love this. So you did a segue where you, if you weren't there, Felicia did a segue where Dermot cut to Felicia and she was talking about what sort was going around the event, and it was something you'd expect to see on a terrestrial broadcaster. So, and he was like, "Damn, she wants my job," and everyone was like, "Yeah, she could probably have it as well, Dermot, in a nice way." So, if you're not based in the UK, Dermot is, by the way, a broadcaster. So he's a radio DJ. He does a lot of TV and kind of Saturday night stuff like that. He's a very, very very well known face in the UK, and he's got a very engaging style. I think that's fair to say. So, anyway, enough about Dermot. Felicia, tell us a bit about you. So about you and Cvent. How long have you been with Cvent and who are Cvent? What do they do?
Yeah, so I've been with Cvent about 7 years, I think, if I'm doing my maths right. And I came from a tech background, a marketing background. I'd gone to a lot of events. I'd run a lot of events. And when this weird company called Cvent reached out to me, I was like, what is this? But it was that perfect combination of technology and events. And so I kind of took the job 7 years ago, never looked back, to help people understand what we do. We basically help marketers like myself and event professionals bring their event strategies to life through technology. We know that you can run an event, you can have another event. Sales would always be like, we need another event, and you'll put another one on. But actually what we're here to do is to kind of connect those dots, like I said earlier, and help people to figure out, what are we doing, why are we doing, and what's the ROI, what are we getting out of it? Can we diversify what we're doing? So whether that's webinars, virtual events, things like that. But yeah, just every kind of event you can think of, events probably right at the heart of it, or at least should be. And I shouldn't leave out the hoteliers. I mentioned hoteliers earlier. I know that's not necessarily the audience, but the ecosystem we really care about. And so we have hoteliers on the platform.
Well, and I guess as part of that mission, what you've got to do is to show leadership in the category as well. You've got to actually show what good looks like. And I think this is what we're going to dive into during the course of the conversation. So, because you want, everyone's got a lot of opinions about events, good and bad, right and wrong, from all sides of the industry. So to provide a bit of context and a bit of what a good looks like, it seems like absolutely the kind of best practice in what B2B brands should be doing in terms of helping people use their category. Okay, so let's get into the detail of it then. We've seen what we've seen in kind of. So I was at the event. I was helping present around this subject, so I know the subject quite well. But great to hear Felicia's perspective because she's really lived and been involved in kind of building up this kind of whole perspective. So, but we've seen a meaningful shift in how B2B organisations are approaching events, and perhaps historically they might have had a single flagship event, which has dominated the agenda and on their objectives. And we're moving perhaps towards a model which Cvent, you're calling event-led growth. Can you help us understand what's driving this change in mindset? What does it actually look like in more detail?
Yeah, well, so just for those that don't really know what event-led growth is, basically it's a shift in how you think about your events, because we know that, like you said, a lot of people run their big flagship event. That doesn't mean that's the only event they run. Like most of the organizations I've worked for, we have loads and loads of events, whether we're calling them that or not, because sometimes it's like we need a lunch, we need a dinner, and they won't call it an event, but it actually is, right? And then all the eyes and all the focus goes on this big flagship event. Whatever that is, it's typically one. And what we're kind of saying is event-led growth should be where you take all of those events that you're running and you put some strategy behind it, basically. Why are you having the event? Who is it for? What is the proposed outcome? And then how do you track and measure that outcome? And how do you measure one event against another event? What does success look like? So it's really putting that level of strategy on it. And I always make fun of, like I said, when I joined Cvent or just before I joined. In fact, when I joined, people were like, oh, you're in the events industry now. I said, am I? And I didn't realize there was an entire industry. I'm a marketer. I have events. And there's all these like pod people that have come out telling me I'm in the industry. And so I think, the events industry is always looking to be more strategic. And I do think as marketers, we don't necessarily tap into that industry and start to look at things as that kind of joined up. How am I connecting back? And we would never accept that in digital marketing. You have your CRM, you've got your Salesforce that all integrates. You just wouldn't accept anything less. You'd be like, oh, I sent an email, but I'm just not sure how it performed. Next one.
I mean, absolutely. And I think the thing that when I got my head around what wasn't hard to what this whole thing was about, it resonated with me because one of the cliches, the fundamental cliches in B2B marketing is the sales team pops up to marketers and goes, we want an event, and marketers have got to scramble around. If they say no, they're seen as kind of, misaligned and unhelpful. But the rationale is somewhere over there, someone else has got it, and they don't really understand what it's for, and they're trying to kind of backfill a rationale for it, and then they run it, and then there's often it's a challenge with budgets. There's all kinds of challenges with that kind of reactive, misaligned approach. And so to try and go, okay, let's just centralize this. Let's try and create a model and a means of being able to compare and do this strategically and recognize that tactical events are part of the program. They probably always have been, but they haven't been recognized and haven't been aligned around a strategic objective. That seemed really resonant to me.
Yeah. And I think of it like, every business typically has your vision, your strategy, your pillars, whatever it is you're calling them. And you often look at, okay, how are we fulfilling that? What are the numbers that we need to get to that? Or, who are we trying to reach to fulfill that? And then you start looking at your channels and you're saying, okay, well, I can get these people through these channels. I could probably gather that number through that channel. The events should just be another channel. It should be a channel that doesn't stand alone. So that ability for a salesperson to come and be like, I want another thing. You're like, okay, let's go back to the business pillars. Let's go back to what we need. Let's go back to like that goal of how many. What is your event that you're proposing going to do? Who is it reaching? What's the number you're getting to? So that way let's imagine you had to say no. And sometimes, marketers, we've got to say no. But your no will be based on a foundation of data and goal and strategy, So then you can have business leader conversations with, not this time, maybe next year when the pillar changes,
But presumably also you've actually had a conversation in advance about what they do need, and you're able to set up things in a way that is you're demonstrating you're fulfilling those already, so you're not having them having a bit of a panic. I mean, I'm pretty painting a negative cliche of salespeople, and not all salespeople like this, but there is a cliche which is based on a truism, that this kind of stuff does happen. And if there's a strategy in place at the start, then you can minimize, or at least, as you say, mitigate these kind of random active events that can sometimes be requested, shall we say.
Absolutely. And you build trust, between you and the sales team, because like you just said, when you set it out, you have a plan, you start to develop this really healthy relationship between you and sales, where they kind of know up front what to expect, and you're working a lot better, a lot smarter together. So I think it's really important.
And you brilliantly brought in the word trust there, which I wanted to get onto next, because obviously trust between sales and marketing is absolutely fundamental. Trust between marketing and all the other functions that customer facing that evolves are fundamental. But there's obviously trust around the buyer, right? And events potentially, I think it's hard to argue that events are not a fundamentally critical pillar of building trust with prospects, right? How do you think that events? You'd agree with that, presumably? And how do you think they fit in around? I feel to me like they're a big pillar of that kind of journey of trying to convince someone to make an investment. Which is that a fair assumption?
Absolutely. I mean, if we look at the historical way that people did business was face to face, right? And it's still embedded within us. I won't lie and say that every single interaction I want to have with a company is face to face. There are times when I just want to get on with it. Let me do my own research. We know now product-led growth is a big thing where people kind of just want to go away, figure it out themselves. But there comes a point where you cannot deny it. If you meet someone face to face, once you've got a bit wise and you've done a little bit of research, the thing that typically solidifies you is a healthy, really good, strong interaction. That typically comes face to face, right? It's very difficult to do that digitally. So, and that's just me. I'm almost talking as a consumer, because as a consumer, that's just my daily life. But as a business buyer, it's quite limiting for me to think that I can just go through the entire interaction online and tick all the boxes and bring something into my business. That's quite difficult. You want to be able to look someone in the eye and say, promise me this is going to work.
Absolutely. Is that notion, isn't there, of the kind of the logical stuff gets you shortlisted, but it's the emotional, tangible stuff that gets you bought, because actually you're making a large, big ticket contract. Your job's on the line, right? Your company's success on the line. You really want to look, as you look the person in the eyes and say, do I trust this person? Are the beliefs credible? What they're saying be credible and believable? And do I want to be aligned with this organisation, potentially in a long-term contract? So, and as you say, it's very hard to not do that in a physical world.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you just say, you mentioned jobs on the line. If I think about some of the technology we all use, but shameless plug for someone, and hopefully someone gives me some kickbacks for this, but Cvent, for example, we use them. It took a long time to onboard Cvent, and we're really happy that we did. But it took a really long time because there's a lot of investment. It's not a cheap product, right? We see the same for us. We're not a cheap product. But it works, and we knew it was going to work. But we had a few marketers bumbling around saying we want to use Cvent. But until we got to those levels where we were having those face-to-face meetings, we'd see them at other events. We go and exhibit at events. There at the event, we're going to have a conversation. It took some time, and a lot of that face-to-face is what propelled the sale along. For us to onboard Cvent. So it just is. I think we'd be denying it if we said that it's not face-to-face that works. But what works better is being able to track it. Quite honestly, if you meet someone and you say, I had a great conversation, it was really good, but you don't record it, you don't take that data and track it and then follow up, and then, maybe you send a few emails, have a digital interaction, do it again, have another event. There needs to be that consistency. Otherwise, it just kind of like peaks and troughs and then it just goes away. Yeah,
absolutely. That's where that sales and marketing alignment is kind of underpins it all, doesn't it? Fundamentally, I should say that I feel like I'm very much on message on this one, and I don't want to come across that I'm not objective about this, but this completely aligns with what we do at B2B Marketing, right? And it always has. We have our kind of 2 or 3 annual big events. One's an award ceremony, it's slightly different. We have 2 big kind of conference events with kind of expo areas. We just had one last week, which is our Global ABM conference. It went really, really well. But then we also, throughout the course of the year, we have more tactical events. We have roundtables and dinners and kind of discussion groups. So, and that's the bit which makes our Propolis community and peer-to-peer advisory platform really sell. It's when people get to meet and understand who's inside it, who the salespeople actually are there. So, and the value of other people. So there's all kinds of aspects to that and face-to-face interaction, which is powerful, which I can see very much firsthand. And I see our clients doing that at our conferences. So, so I'm bought in that respect. I just want to make that kind of abundantly clear because it aligns with my experience as someone who writes about B2B marketing and understands how it goes. So I know one thing that was apparent in your kind of development of this theme was you've done some research in terms of kind of best practice and in kind of event strategy, particularly using how you're defining ELG, event-led growth, and so people who are doing it and people who aren't doing it as well, who got there, who haven't got there. And your research shows that 79% of companies with an ELG approach meet their revenue goals every quarter. That's a striking figure. What does this data tell us about why this approach is so successful? Is it about the volume, quality, frequency, or is there something else inside? Is it the strategic alignment that's what the reason it's working?
Yeah, I think it's a couple of things of what you just said, like the quality of your meetings should improve if you become more strategic about how they're run. So let's start at the basics. If you align on the kind of, I want to say back to the, why are we doing this? What are the outcomes? So let's say all of your events are tied to your business goals. We've said that. But if there's some kind of consistent measurement between one event and another, that's also very, very helpful. So just because it's a dinner, I have often found, and I've even said it myself, you can't really measure a dinner. We had the dinner, they had a great time. It was great. I'm glad they came and engaged with one way, but you actually can. We've got, and I don't really want to plug our technology too much, but it's like we've got ways of saying, okay, we know the people that abandoned that registration page for a start. They came, they've been thinking about it, and they went away. So first of all, I've got a group of people that were kind of engaged because they abandoned. Second of all, I've got the people that registered didn't turn up. Third of all, I've got the people that registered and came. And on the end of that, using lead capture that's just in your phone, you can note down conversations that you've had at the dinner where someone was like, here's my next step of interest. I actually want to build another relationship with people in the community, or I actually am thinking about, putting together content, and you're like, oh, that could be a content partner. There's so many reasons why people could have come to that dinner beyond, I just wanted to buy something. Now take all of those points, so I've mentioned about 4 or 5 points there, and apply exactly the same measurement to the lunch that you then have, to the conference that you then go to the whatever else it is you do, to the webinar. People abandon the webinar red page. People turned up the same measurement. You can start to say, well, whenever we do this, that seems to be the driver. Whenever we do that seems to be where people want to talk about product. Whenever we do it, and you start to look at them together as your strategic events, it's multi-touch, multi-format, consistent, frequent. There's all these I don't want to call them buzzwords, but it helps you to create this kind of flywheel of what are we doing? How are we doing? Why are we doing it? And just keep feeding back in. And then from all of that, you've got so much data to share with your teams. You could start to build content based on the things the conversations you've had, because you capture the conversations. So you remember I said, there might be someone saying, oh, I really wanted to build content about this or partner with that. Well, you can take the content from those events and keep it going and make sure that the event doesn't live and die on the day because you captured the data, So for me, it all comes back to how are you thinking about them together rather than as these one-off things. So I'm not surprised that those that have adopted that way, it comes as no shock that they would be able to hit their target. They know much more about those people than the people that I had a great event. I feel bad for myself. I always joke about, they'll go and say it was great. And I'm like, should we do it again? Yeah. Okay, well, where's the ROI? I don't know. Don't tell me you don't know. I need to know the ROI. You can't just tell me it was a good dinner. I had drinks. Fantastic. Now what do I do? It
felt nice, therefore we should do it again. I totally get it. And the other stat that was great from the front was that which I think is just worth bringing out here, is they said that people who got to ELG got their sales cycles sped up by 20 to 30 days. That's massive in B2B, right? That is, if you went to your sales director and said, oh, I can increase sales velocity by a month. You'd be on the top of your Christmas card list at the very least, love you, wouldn't they? So.
But you should really, if you think about, we did research a few years ago now about, I think we've done it a few times, about how long it takes if you don't contact someone after you met them at an event within the next, I think it was something like 3 to 4 days, the chances of that person still being engaged with you next week just drop dramatically. We continue to do the research on our own data as well when we go to events, and we can see that there is a window that you have an opportunity to go back to that person and say, hey, what about that next stage? If you miss even that window, you increase that number again. So that, you could have decreased it by 20 days and then suddenly it's up again. So that's that consistency. You really have to, it's not just the event, you have to put the end on it as well.
So, and that brings us to another really good question, which is around actually what does this alignment look like? So that making sure that you do follow up really well is great. Presumably that's the post-event stuff. Presumably there's a lot of pre-event alignment as well, and perhaps even during event, like how many salespeople do you allow into the room to sit around the dinner table? Like, should be 20 salesperson to every prospect? Probably not, even though they might like that. So tell us a bit about that other sides of alignment, what alignment looks like.
I would say it's about, so we spoke about this as being a full sort of channel strategy. So you kind of should have I'm going to go back to it. Why are we doing this? So let's say your goal is to meet new people, whether that's because you're a part of an association or community building, you want to meet new people. You have to know what those steps are. Like, what is our typical, how do we meet new people? And the data should tell you where you get like the most kind of bang for your buck. So if you're saying, okay, first of all, my best bet is to find a partner who has access to the database, and then we're going to do a few, content syndications and things like that. So you know your steps, you know your typical steps. You should be pre-plotting where do events live in those steps. Can you therefore use that partner to go out about that event and advertise that event and talk about that and then learn a bit about them and do some, interrogation, investigation? Does that then feed back into your event system so that when you're inviting those people, so like, for example, in our Cvent system, you can segment your emails by the different types of people that you're planning to meet and want to reach at this event. And so those emails, you can automate them, they go out, you can see what happens. So you can already be having these conversations, these getting to know yous pre-event. Maybe some of them you discover aren't email people. They want to be spoken to digitally. You want to get them on LinkedIn. You should know that before they get to the event, right? So that when you get there, maybe if you are doing an event app or something, or even still back on email or digital, your notifications might say, hey, people, why don't you get social? Because those are the people that like to get social. Maybe there are others that aren't. So it's really building that picture of people. We have this slide that we always show when we go to events where this woman's really fuzzy on a slide, and the more and more you get to know her through all these different touch points, she clears up. And events always make you very clear. Like, suddenly I can see your face. I know who you are. So it really accelerates. And then after the event, taking all that data, everything you know about them, and reaching out to them in the way they want to be spoken to. One of the things I'm super excited about is we've developed AI technology that's much more for the attendee than it is for the planner. Typically, we were like, planner, marketer, you've got to think about all these things. But the attendee, having AI in their hands, it's a bit more automated in terms of, this is what I liked, these are the sessions I went to, this is what my day looked like. And then for the marketer and the planner, that information feeds back into the system of, this is real personalization, this is how this person interacted with you, so this is what you should do next in your other channels. So now we're back into online. So you come offline for the event, back into online, but then the flywheel should go again. If I see you again, I should know even more about you. It shouldn't be like I never met you at the event that we had 2 months ago, So it really needs to be very connected. I think a lot of people are not struggling, but I think they're very busy. And so they spend a lot of time executing the tactic rather than thinking about it as that full kind of funnel.
Yeah, it's a kind of... I feel sometimes marketers go into execution mode and they don't, and it's just they get the next deliverable delivered, and then would rush to carry over. Probably because everyone's overworked, but at the same time, it's trying about if you're not doing those things, you're probably not getting the maximum, or you're definitely not getting the maximum impact out of the effort you've already put in. So you're kind of wasting all of your effort, I suppose, or a lot more of your effort. So what you've done, and we'll share this with the podcast, as you've created a kind of matrix showing how you get to event-led growth from kind of perhaps a more less strategic, approach to events. Perhaps whether it's focused around a single event or whether it's on some smaller events but less kind of joined up. But I think one of the things that it's kind of obviously apparent in all of this is that there is to do this, there's a kind of technology component here, right? There's things like templates, automation, compliance, and speed to launch. So does the technology enable ELG, or does ELG require the right technology to work? What's the kind of dependency look like?
I think the first thing is the mindset. I'd love to come on and be like, yeah, you definitely need to start with technology. You probably shouldn't. If I'm being honest, I think don't start with tech. Start with the right mindset. You've got to get, your organization on board to how important is this? What is the investment we're willing to make? Maybe look at the existing data that you do have or that's missing. If you try and figure out those steps of what is it I'm trying to know, is an event going to help me to figure that out? Then you can identify what do you need and how are you going to get this off the ground. Then to execute it, you will probably need some good technology, because in order to do a lot of the measurement that I've been speaking about and feeding the data back in, you're going to need the tech. I think I remember years ago going and I had these, printed these show notepads, and the show notepad had the kind of like, who have I met? What did we talk about? And my expectation was that people would fill this notepad out, and then we'd get all of that back in, and we'd somehow get the information from the notepads into the CRM. Yeah, I think those ended up in the bottom of my desk drawer. So, that's not what you want. That's not the data we're talking about. So that's probably the worst way. And people are still kind of doing that. Even though they're like, we've got all this technology, I do take notes. Even if you're taking notes on your phone or whatever it is, if it isn't connected back to your CRM, you're probably not using the data properly. So there needs to be this relationship between technology and what you had pre-planned in the first place.
I like that. I mean, I think you can do the planning. You should do the planning in an offline, or not an offline, using traditional tools, right? Using spreadsheets, etc., and build a business case and work out what your what your event cadence is and which events you're using. But when you actually start to activate it, you're probably going to need the technology, because actually, if you're doing a complex schedule of events, you're going to start falling over yourself if you don't actually have the right tools to enable you to do it. It's possible, but it gets very messy very quickly, I suspect.
And also, we spoke a bit about, that speed to react back to the person that came to the event. You're not going to get that speed without technology. You're not going to get any automation without technology. So all of the things that you would use in your other sort of marketer life, when it comes to events, you should give it the same, credit and the quality as you would your other channels.
Yeah, absolutely, definitely. And then when you get to the kind of the advanced end of doing the ELG kind of framework, you're starting to use things like intent signals and stuff like that. And you mentioned 6 Sense earlier on. So you're combining events with intent data, and this is quite sophisticated. How should marketers be thinking about integrating it? Actually, that's a crap question. That's not really a question. That's a statement.
I don't mind. I'm happy to answer it. You could do. I'll make it as a answer.
So Felicia, the whole ELG kind of framework and mindset, as you say, very importantly, obviously makes sense for large enterprises where they've got different business units and different territories and doing lots of different events. But what about mid-market or smaller B2B organizations? Is ELG really a kind of an effective strategy for those organizations with more limited resources? And if it is, where do they start?
It's a good question. And so first of all, I would say, yes, anyone can use this, ELG strategy. But the reason why I think it's a good question is because, we're quite a big organization. We run lots and lots of events. And even I think at the beginning of this year, were encouraged to stop and slow down and just don't keep doing all these things and start looking at the why. Why are we doing everything? And I think we actually could learn from the mid-sized and the smaller companies, because they should have to be more strategic. They can't run typically the volume of events that an enterprise company could. So they already should be coming at this of like, right, we've got so and so much money. What are we actually going to do and why? They should actually be much more willing to right size what are they doing and where is that budget going to go. Pick what are the repeatable actions that they're going to do. Do they need to have that executive monthly roundtable, and what are they learning from it and what are they getting out of it? So maybe the enterprises could actually learn from those smaller businesses. And even when you think about, what are we getting out of our events? What's the squeeze that we get? We've spoken about leads, we've spoken about data. We actually get really good content out of your events as well. And if you're a smaller business, you don't always have the budget to say, okay, let's go and run some content. We're not a content house. We can't do that all the time. So let's make sure these events are going to give us, yes, maybe some leads, yes, maybe some community building, but also some content. How can we take the clips from the event and make those social, and then, use them for our nurture programs and get our SDRs to follow up on that? And then we'll have another event. And so I really do think that it isn't about big budgets. It's about the why and the how, and putting that time and effort and brain power into it. And smaller businesses do need to accelerate those sales plays. They don't have necessarily the cash cows that are already coming in and bringing in all the business. So they've got much more of a need to have that acceleration of the sales pipeline. So definitely should be using it, maybe just on a smaller scale. But yeah, let the enterprises turn their heads and find out, what's happening. Because I think we waste a lot of money. I really shouldn't say that. But I do think enterprise businesses just do the doing because it's been done, and they just carry on doing it. And there's a lot of waste. So probably, could learn something or a thing or two from the mid-size.
I feel like in this world, I mean, we started this whole podcast talking about the kind of the overwhelm of content, the amount of content that's out there, and so doing less but doing it better, I feel, is really where we should be right now. I mean, my big kind of theme is on thought leadership. We do a big piece of content and then split, then deploy that, reinvent that, across the whole of your content in your events, then get your events to contribute to that as well. I think that feels like a much smarter approach given where we are right now. And one thing we talked earlier on again was around digital events as well. And do you think digital events are much part of this approach? And it's not just around it's not face-to-face in a physical real world. Digital can be part of this too.
100%, not can, should 100% be part of it. I think, before, I hate calling about the pandemic, but the webinar was just this marketer thing, and then events was something else. And it really did bring it back together. And we developed our own virtual technology during, that time, and our webinar platform. And we have found that it isn't declining in the way that we thought it would. We thought, we'll build it because we have to stay in the game. But actually, people are really glad. They're like, great, I've got my offline, I've got my online, I can track them similarly. We spoke earlier about having the same measurement for both sides, because that way you're understanding, I could probably take that offline event and make it a webinar. I don't need to have, the venue and the team and everyone going out. That thing could be a webinar because I'm maybe getting the same yield that I would if I'd have had it offline. But some of those webinars maybe gather momentum, and you do take them offline because they've got enough of a following. So they should really be very symbiotic and work together.
Yeah, I feel like they are. I've done more webinars than I can possibly count, but as a host, but I feel like they're such a brilliant bridgehead from kind of static, or not static, but text-based content, and then into video, and then into live, and then into live video, and then into actual face-to-face. They are, and as you say, it can, sometimes it's not a webinar for webinar's sake, it's a webinar because this is what we're trying to achieve, and this is what the content looks like, and this is the message we're trying to deliver. So to try to pigeonhole feels a bit restrictive and perhaps lacking a bit of vision, possibly. So we've covered an awful lot of ground, and we're probably just about out of time, Felicia. It's been great talking to you about this, and I think it's a fascinating topic, and I definitely applaud what Cvent are doing and trying to show some leadership here. If you're a marketing leader or even a marketing manager listening to this, and you're thinking about, we need to evolve our event strategy, what's the first thing they should do? What kind of diagnostics should they go down, and how can you help teams assess where they actually are and what they need to change first?
Yeah, so, we have a maturity model that we often try and use with our leaders, our leadership group. We've run an event maturity model. Now we're running the kind of event-led marketer maturity model, and we always start with diagnosis. It always starts with, where are you now? What stage are you in? Are you doing ad hoc events? Do you have your one flagship event? Are they tied to any program? So I love an events program, but actually what you should be finding is that your events fit into customer marketing retention, or your event fits into, community build, or it fits in, like, what is the program that your events fit into? And then, just try and think, are they actually strategic, or are we running them because we've always ran them, or because they're nice? Are we getting any data from them? Start to map it. So step 2 would be, once you figure that out, start to map it back to your, I would say, revenue goals, because for a lot of marketers, it is revenue driven. But actually, not everyone is thinking about revenue. Some people are just thinking about, growing. I think you mentioned propolis. Growing a community of people. That's a fair goal. That might be, essentially, people want to make money, but one of your goals could just be, we just want to grow. Just want to grow that community, grow that audience. So are you hitting your goals today with those events? I would say after that, maybe just pick one of those. If you can't just say, right, everything's now event-led growth, maybe just pick one program or one stream or one goal, and try and map like a 90-day, 60, 90-day, what would it look like if we did change it? If we made these more strategic, how does that change this program, this series? And try and bring in sales to that conversation. How do they think? What do they need? What's missing for them? Are they seeing the data and the goals and everything like that? Are they in that conversation? If not, they probably should be. So I'd say start small, figure it out where you are today, have that mapped out. What technology probably is the final layer on that are you using to get all of that data and map it back? Is it integrated? And give it a go. It's the first step. Not everyone's going to be bought in on day one, but just give it a go.
I think what's compelling about this whole idea is you're taking what potentially for some organizations is a set of random or disconnected activities and trying to put a structure around them. And it's potentially putting marketing in a better position to be a commercial revenue driver in the organization. I mean, you made the point that not all events are about revenue, but a lot of them are. And a lot of marketers are ultimately what's going to demonstrate success and move companies on and marketers on is showing revenue impact. So yeah, I think this is exciting. It's a great way to look at it. So yeah, congratulations on Cvent for doing this. And Felicia, it's been great to talk to you today. I really appreciate having you on the podcast.
Thank you. It's nice to be here with my marketing friends.
Well, I hope you've enjoyed it as well. And if you have, please don't forget to like and better still subscribe. We'd love to get you back to hear more great content like this. There are loads of other episodes around the whole theme of trust more generally in B2B marketing. And I hope you can dig into some of those, both audio and on video as well. But for now, thanks so much for joining us and I hope to see you again soon.